Greetings and salutations. Welcome once again to the Capeless Crusaders live at the time from the Safe House. My name is, of course, David Barry at Dr. Barry on varying social media platforms. As you can tell this evening, it is just me. It is the solo show. I am rolling Han Solo as, I don't know if they say that. I say that. But it is just me this evening due to technology limitations, parent-teacher conference, or PTA meetings, children with fevers, band practice. It's just me. But we, when we're in a group, are collectively your number one, allegedly, comic book podcast, supposedly, for anything related to comics in the ethos. So we've been told by our parents. You can check out anything related to the Capeless Crusaders at thecapelesscrusaders.com. That is our home on the internet, our home away from home. Children of Fevers. Yes. We are, like I said, a comic book based podcast based here in Northern California. And today, on today's episode, very special, we are talking about none other than the aquatic ace himself. We are talking about Aquaman, as the Aquaman movie is going to be coming up here in late December. Tonight's episode is Aquaman 101. I'm going to tell you the basics, everything you need to know. Supposedly. I mean, obviously there's going to be stuff. I mean, 70 years. The character's been around for a while. But I'm going to tell you a bunch of basic stuff about Aquaman, books to read, storylines to check out, the basics of who he is as a character, so we can talk about that going into the movie here in late December. So, first off, when we are in the Safe House, we like to go around the horn, and I don't have the button set up, so we're not going to do it. We're just going to talk about I'm going to first talk about the comic books I've been reading this week. I think you should check them out because, well, I always like telling you about comic books that I think you should be checking out. So, oh, I cut out. I died. Wait, there we go. We're back. So, comics that I think you should check out. So I am currently rereading the run of Alan Moore's saga of the Swamp Thing. So the reason I'm doing this is because DC Universe is making a television show out of it that it should be coming up here. I think in the next year it's going to be coming out. I'm really excited for it. I'm looking forward to it, and I think I'm back. So I'm rereading Saga of the Swamp Thing. It's one of my favorite comics of all time, and I'm doing that also in preparation because we have a reading assignment later on this month. We're going to talk about it as a podcast. We're going to break it down, go through the ins and outs of Alan Moore's Saga of the Swamp Thing, Volume 1. So that is what I'm reading right now. I also read a couple of Aquaman stories. We'll get into those later, specifically because I wanted to be prepared for tonight. And I also kind of wanted to see what the director said he was drawing from as far as comics go. So, first, we need to talk about some comic book news, because there's always news in the comic book world, and there's a lot of it this week, and some of it's good, some of it's bad. So we'll see what happens. So first off, in the news this week, Daredevil has been canceled by Netflix. We will get no season 4. This comes after the drop of season 3 a couple weeks ago. And people aren't happy, but the viewership, apparently the viewership was not what it needed to be. There's also rumors of issues between Netflix and Marvel Studios that could also explain why it got canceled. I personally, I mean, I'm a factor. I think I watched season 2. I haven't watched season 3. I'm like, we've had this conversation on the podcast before. I dropped off Punisher season 1, about halfway through. Didn't watch Punisher, didn't finish Jessica Jones, didn't finish Luke Cage, Iron Fist. I know I'm on a comic book podcast. Why am I not watching all these comic book shows? Because I got other stuff going on. You know, I got a life, I got a job, and they just weren't really drawing me in, so I didn't watch them. So maybe I'm part of the reason why Daredevil was canceled, because at this point, all the Netflix shows, their viewership did drop. That's one of the things they cite, but they also cited creative differences between them, and a bunch of other people were like, oh, okay, cool. That means they're going to go over to the Disney streaming service. Apparently, as insider information says, I don't know if this is actually legitimate, but someone who supposedly knows a lot of the people in the inner workings say that Marvel Studios, like the MCU, and then Marvel TV, apparently they don't really get along in a lot of ways. So there's a really good chance that we're not going to see the Marvel Netflix shows move over to the Disney Plus. Of course, also they are still going to be on Netflix, like they're still going to live there. So what's going to happen to him? Is Marvel going to reboot Daredevil? Is Daredevil going to come back? Is he going to be involved in the MCU and the movie universe? We will have to wait and see. Spyro, yes, I know Punisher was really good. Punisher was great. It was so intense. It was really intense, and I had to take a break from it, and I never got back into it. It was just, like I said, other things, life, finds a way. And so I was not able to get back into it, but maybe I will now that everything's getting canceled. Maybe I'll get back in and check it out. In other news, Marvel related, it looks like Loki, the god of mischief, is in fact dead, confirmed by the Russo brothers that in Avengers Infinity War, when we see Loki get choked out by Thanos, that's it. That's all she wrote. Even though he is getting a show on the Disney Plus streaming service, it is happening in the past. It's other stories. He dead. Loki is dead as far as the movies are concerned. That was confirmed by the Russos. Interesting that they had to. They had to confirm that, and that people wouldn't listen to it. Lizard Wizard, thank you for noticing the Funkos. And Antic Fire, if you call me Dave, I'm gonna drop the band hammer on you. In other news, this is totally comic book related because there is a SpongeBob comic book, but sadly, SpongeBob creator Steven Hillenburg did pass away. He was diagnosed with ALS. I can't even remember how long he's been fighting it. So the creator of SpongeBob, there's a SpongeBob comic. It is a lot of fun if you like SpongeBob, which as a kid of the 90s and early 2000s, SpongeBob is bread and butter. So that's terrible loss to the world of animation, and really a creative force that drove one of the best cartoons I think ever. In better news, in happier news, both Aquaman, which we're talking about tonight, and Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse are both getting really good reviews out of the initial press screenings that we're seeing. Into the Spider-Verse looks like so much fun. I don't think anyone thought that was going to do bad, but people are not concerned about Aquaman. But it's the DC universe films have not been great up until this point. And except for Wonder Woman. And so a lot of people are, we're holding out, but no, the initial reactions are not better than Wonder Woman. I think a lot of people are saying that Wonder Woman but I think Wonder Woman also was so new and it was so refreshing. Now it's just kind of like, as long as they're better than Justice League, people excited. But I say that with 100% confidence. I imagine there are some people who really just like moist Jason Momoa. Mo Moista. I guess that's going to be what we're doing, but they're both doing well. And in other movie news, Antic Fire, I agree. Better direction than the previous DC films minus Wonder Woman. I think, I don't agree. I haven't seen it yet, but based on the previews and everything I'm seeing, I think that's how I'm feeling. That's what I'm looking forward to. In other Marvel movie news and DC movie news, two movies that are reportedly in production, or at least in the, bowels of pre-production, however that begins. I don't even understand. I don't know how movies actually work. I just pretend. I just do a podcast. But supposedly, a Shang-Chi movie is in the works at Marvel. Shang-Chi being the first Asian lead in Marvel Comics, would be the first Asian lead in Marvel Comics films. Shang-Chi being the master of Kung Fu. So a lot of people on the one hand are kind of like, Shang-Chi in and of himself is kind of a racial stereotype. On the other hand, they're like, it could be really big to have an Asian lead. I love Shang-Chi personally. Like, I think I'm a sucker for martial arts comics and stuff like that. So I think I would be into it. On the other hand, in the WB DC camp. Apparently, they are moving forward with a Zatanna or Zatanna. It's one of those things I've never actually heard it pronounced. I've only ever just read it. But Zatanna is supposedly getting a movie. She's, of course, the magic user who her magic spells are saying words backwards. Her father, I'm blanking on it. I think it was Zatara. Now I can't remember. So we'll see if that ends up going the way it's going. Back to the chat, things are going all over. I haven't seen the new Captain Marvel trailer because I was not watching Monday Night Football. And yes, you loved Shang-Chi in Mortal Kombat. I mean, he is like half the characters, like, because they're all just stereotypes at that point. So yes, we might be getting a Zatanna movie. We might be getting a Shang-Chi movie. We will see. First off, now that we are through the news, I needed to mention, because I completely forgot to talk about at the top of our show, our sponsors. Beard Balm Brush. They are what's keeping this monstrosity beautiful. Beard Balm Brush, they take beeswax, they take beard balm, they take oil, they make it into a nice brush shape that you can brush right through. Use the code CAPELESS, get 15% off. And Critical Dice, if you go to Critical Dice, use the code CAPELESS, you get 15% off your dice, the books, any D&D supplies that you can think of. And then also, of course, Empire's Comics Vault, our home away from home, located at 1120 Fulton Avenue, Suite K. Amy, you're not allowed to get on me for forgetting the sponsors because I haven't done this solo in a very long time. I'm used to having all kinds of people here supporting me and stuff, and I'm all here alone. But it's also because I only have one functioning microphone right now. So, okay, sada. So, our main topic for the evening, like I said at the top of the show, it is Aquaman 101. Later on this month, we are going to be getting an Aquaman movie. We're not going to be reviewing it because we're going to be on winter break during that point. But our sister show, The Dame Patrol, who you can check out on the TCC network, they are going to be doing a brief snippet on that, Into the Spider-Verse and Bumblebee. So they're going to be getting all of those because we are not going to be around. We're going to be hanging with our families, and well, I mean, they're going to be hanging with their families too, but you know, antic fire. So Aquaman 101 is the name of the game. In our 101 series, we basically give you the basics. Oh, get it? We basically give you the basics of a character. We talk about where they came from, their various iterations, important stories to read, powers, enemies, so on and so forth. Now, Aquaman is an interesting character because people like to mock Aquaman incessantly based on his skill set, his costume choices, all kinds of stuff. So let's get right into it, and we will talk about the aquatic ace known as Aquaman. So, for those of you unaware, Aquaman originally debuted in 1941 in More Fun Comics, number 73. Back when, you know, comics had fun names like More Fun Comics. He was created by Paul Norris, who's the artist, and Mort Weisinger, who is a writer. Do you think Mort was Jewish? Yes, I think Mort was Jewish. Happy Hanukkah, everyone. Amy, you're just all over the place. So, like I said, happy second night of Hanukkah. So, 1941, we got Aquaman. So, pre-World War II, which meant that in the Golden Age, he definitely fought Nazis. In the Golden Age, he was actually... originally, he was human. Later on, became a human Atlantean hybrid. His name was Arthur Curry. He did not punch water Hitler. No, he instead fought Nazi U-boat captains. But my notes just disappeared on me. So first off, there's a brief little story that kind of gave his initial background, and it was found in the Golden Age comics. It was: the story must start with my father, a famous undersea explorer. If I spoke his name, you would recognize it. Nope. My mother died when I was a baby, and he turned his work to solving the ocean's secrets. His greatest discovery was an ancient city in the depths where no other diver had ever penetrated. Oh, good choice of words. My father believed it was the lost kingdom of Atlantis. He made himself a watertight home in one of the palaces and lived there, studying the records and the devices of the race's marvelous wisdom. From the books and records, he learned ways of teaching me to live under the ocean, drawing oxygen from the water and using all the power of the sea to make me wonderfully strong and swift. By training and 100 scientific secrets, I became what you see, a human being who lives and thrives under the water. So this was obviously before it's like he was human, but he had the powers of that, and they've retconned his story a lot throughout his history. But real fast, just a quick rundown. Arthur Curry is his name. He's a human Atlantean hybrid, depending on which story you're reading. He is king of the seven seas. He's the aquatic ace. He's the marine marvel. And he was also known as the dweller in the depths. That's a really creepy one, which we will talk about. So first off, this is always important when it comes to any super powered person. We need to know what their powers are. His powers have been lessened by some creators, have been beefed up by other creators. Some people like to mock him because he can talk to fish. But right off the gate, let's talk about his big power set. So, aquatic physiology, which means he can breathe underwater, he can survive underwater, he can handle the pressure of being underwater, not like the peer pressure, like the actual, underwater pressure. He has enhanced strength, speed, endurance, agility, durability, reflexes, and senses. They actually listed all of those, which I think is really special. Because if you imagine, I don't know how many Dragon Ball Z fans we have in here, but when the DBZ fighters would train in the high gravity situations, that would actually make them super strong when they come out of it. So I imagine that if he does all of his fighting and growing and everything under the water, when he gets up on land, he's just going to be super what's the word I'm looking for? Fast. The reflexes. I think that was in there. He does have telepathic control of all aquatic life. That's the and then he can talk to the fish. He is super fast swimming, obviously. Able to speak and understand any language on Earth. This is one that I didn't realize, that he was able to talk to anybody, apparently. He, of course, has the Trident of Poseidon and hydrokinesis, which is the control of water. Alternate continuities. There's certain continuities where he can't control water, and that they give that ability to Mara, who we'll talk about. And kind of depends on that. It is not Doppler. It is communicating psychically with fish. I'm talking to fish right now. I'm actually calling a whale, because they're my friends, to go find Antic-Fire and crush his home. So important allies. That's always important, again, when it comes to superhero. We need to know who's helping them out in the fight against evil. Mara, who we talked about. Mara, who is the Queen of Atlantis in various stories. Aquaman's wife. She's actually from take two. She's actually from another dimension. Water-dwelling beings from another dimension. Aqualad, of course, because every Aquaman needs an Aqualad. And he also needs some Aquafor. There's Aquagirl, because, of course, at some point in the 70s, they were like, hey, maybe we should have a female character. There's Topo. I don't know if any of you knew this, but Topo is his... depending on which iteration. Some people did a squid. He was an octopus, however. He was his octopus friend, We had Crypto, the Wonder Dog, and, we had everyone has a dog. No, he has an octopus. And he was also an anthropomorphic octopus. Later on. It's kind of weird. And then Dolphin. Dolphin, who is... she's actually made recent in the Rebirth. She's come back in there. And there's also been actual dolphins. So... a lot of his enemies, interestingly, have, we're not talking about now, we're talking about then, the octopus. That's what's best. I don't care about now. We're talking about the history. His enemies, a lot of these are actually introduced in the 1960s. These were in the Silver Age when he got the kind of the focus on Atlantis, and he was becoming a founding member of the Justice League of America. I don't know if any of you knew that. He's actually a founding member. But that's when he started to get a lot of his enemies. So the big one, or one of his biggest ones, was Ocean Master, who's actually his half brother Orm, he's amnesiac, Amnesian. He doesn't remember who he is, and he's the Ocean Master, who it seems they're not necessarily changing his origin, but not going with his original origin, but he is definitely going to be in the movie. Black Manta, who's also going to be in the movie. He's a dude who wears a costume with big red glowing eyes. You've seen them. Black Manta is one of my favorite villains of all time. I remember him from the original Super Friends. I was all about it. The Fisherman. I'm just going to let that sink in. The Fisherman was one of Aquaman's enemies. the Fisherman. All right, now with that awkward silence, there's also the Scavenger. Scavenger and Fisherman pretty much disappeared after the 60s. They popped up randomly in the 70s and 80s, but not nearly as much. And then this is my favorite one. There are organizations in both Marvel and DC Comics that they're just like, hey, we really need to spell a very specific word, or we need to have these letters arranged and mean something like MODOK. MODOK. And so I'm trying to figure out how to really explain. Well, there was this organization called Ogre that was an enemy of Aquaman, OGRE, which is the Organization for General Revenge and Enslavement. Again, I'm just going to have an awkward silence while you think about the Organization for General Revenge and Enslavement. What do you think about that, chat? So back again to the Golden Age. The Golden Age of comics, which I really don't think is... I mean, it was great, but I mean, come on, we're in a friggin' fantastic renaissance right now. I think we should call this the Platinum Age. But regardless, of course, so in the Golden Age, Aquaman mainly did a lot of his wartime adventures battling Nazi U-boats and Axis sea-based villains. So, of course, very obviously like racial stereotypes of like Japanese and other people who were seafaring, and Aquaman would go punch out. After that, he would go after various sea criminals, including modern-day pirates, mainly threats to sailors, shipping lanes, wildlife. So they painted him into a corner a little bit, giving him only so many sea-worthy enemies. You get it? Now, in the Silver Age, is when he really took off. That's when they established that he was a hybrid. He was human and Atlantean. He was the son of lighthouse keeper Tom Curry and Atlanta. I'm going to say Atlanta because that sounds better. Exile of Atlantis. So in the Silver Age is when they focused a lot more on Atlantis itself, Atlantis' story, history, him going down there, it existing, it wasn't destroyed and lost. Was he the captain now? Look at me. I am the captain now. And you guys are talking about the Gordon Fisherman. What is going on in this chat room right now? You guys are just having way too much fun. The mid 80s, there was actually, because I was checking to the end of the Silver Age, Aquaman briefly did lead the Justice League of America. He fought back an invasion of Martians. It was basically like he took over. He was the lead. And they had a bunch of like C-list Justice League members, and everyone else was off-world, and he had to fight back on a Martian invasion. And then in 1985, he basically resigned to work on his marriage with Mara. And that's the best part, is that an article I was reading is it didn't just say like, to be married, to be a king. It was to work on his marriage, because apparently being a hero, I mean, we've learned that doesn't work out well for a lot of relationships. So then we flash forward to the modern age. Are you guys singing Under the Sea in the chat right now? I'm trying to tell you about Aquaman. This very serious aquatic blonde man in an orange and green scaled unitard. And you guys are singing Under the Sea. Can you guys take this seriously just for a minute, please? Thank you. Because everything's better down where it's wetter. So flash forward to the modern age. That's where they had a couple weird changes. They rewrote his story. Once again, Arthur Curry was actually the lighthouse keeper. And he was an adoptive father to a boy named Orin, who was fully Atlantean. And he was known as Aquaman. And this is actually where we got the kind of revamped view of Aquaman. This is where we got the long blonde hair. This is where we eventually get the harpoon hand, the hook, and then eventually the retractable hook, the arm, shoulder, gladiator armor, the unhinged, brooding Aquaman. So that's the modern age is where Kurt Busiek took over. Kurt Busiek is, for a lot of us, a very prolific writer, and made a couple changes, dramatic hair flips, dingle hoppers. What's a dingle hopper? So that's when we got the awesome I mean, some would say awesome, but basically darker, more serious Aquaman. Flashpoint came later on. This was in the 90s when they originally gave him the long hair and the harpoon, and he was just angry. The super crazy unhinged Emperor Aquaman was in Flashpoint, which we'll talk about. Then flash forward again a couple years, because now here's the problem with something called the modern age is once you're in the modern age, whether it's comics, television, archaeology, when do you leave the modern age? When do you go into the postmodern age, which is a stupid term because then we're just traveling in the future, I guess. So technically we're all still in the modern age right now, I guess. But there was a very important comic book that a lot of us were big fans of, and that was called Blackest Night. Now, Blackest Night, of course, centered around the Lantern Corps. It came as Jeff Johns wrote it. It came after the War of Lights, was where we introduced all these different this different spectrum of emotions of the rings. You had the Green Lanterns. They were all about oh, my foot's falling asleep. Oh, anyway. So you had all the different Lantern Corps, and they were all coming together. And there was this prophecy basically with these Black Lanterns were going to arrive. And the Black Lanterns, their emotion was death, which doesn't make any sense at all because it's really just a lack of everything, not really a lack of emotion. But Blackest Night actually saw the kind of rebirth of Aquaman, because Aquaman at that point had actually been gone for a little while. The Aquaman we knew, the Arthur Curry of the canon universe. Brightest Day did follow Blackest Night, get it? And in Brightest Day, Aquaman was resurrected, and it kind of focused on him coming back into the world, meeting Mera, taking back over as the King of Atlantis. Following that, this is where it just kind of starts to get messy. Following Blackest Night, Brightest Day, which is 2009, 2011. Then we got New 52 and Convergence, and then we got into the rebirth in the DCU. Now, for those of you who don't read comics, they really like to reboot more often than anything else. They get bored with what they're doing. They want to restart a storyline. They want to retcon a character, and DC became wonderfully awful at it. I mean, Marvel wasn't any better in the last decade. So the New 52 relaunch kind of goes back to basics with Aquaman, reestablishes who he is as a character, who he goes back to short blonde hair, the clean orange and green, didn't have the harpoon anymore, wasn't angry, didn't have the beard or anything. Convergence, we then get the universe is all converging and then restarting once again. This is a couple years later, and then we get into what we are in today, which is Rebirth in the DC universe. So Rebirth is actually the first time that I've read an Aquaman comic for more than just a few minutes. I actually stuck with Aquaman for a while in this most recent one, and it was actually really well done. So that's the brief history of Aquaman. That is 70 years that I just tried to boil down into 15 to 20 minutes. Basically what you need to know is, as far as the canon is concerned, the way they've restarted stuff and they've gone back, the main stuff that's inspiring the movie, according to the director, is the New 52 run. He basically saw that as a really a solid way of showing off Aquaman. At least that's what he said in an interview. There's obviously tons of source material that he can pull from, but as it stands, Aquaman is a human Atlantean hybrid. Sometimes rejects the throne, sometimes takes the throne, on again, off again with Mera. Has a trident, again, depending on which story you're in. So we'll see how he actually gets transferred onto the screen. We've already seen a little bit. We know he has a trident. We know he likes to drink. We know he's basically just Jason Momoa in the films at this point. I don't know what they're actually gonna go for that. Now, as far as what comic books you need to read, how can I put this lightly? There's 70 years of Aquaman that you could check out. There's also so many retcons that you could just pick up a good couple chunk volumes and be pretty solid with your Aquaman history. It really depends how far back you want to go. Are you a diehard, are you a diehard fan? Do you like older style of comics? Are you an 80s comic fan, 90s comics fan? Do you looking for a little more succinct story? Are you looking for something kind of out there? There's something for everyone when it comes to Aquaman, which is something I never thought I'd say. The biggest thing to know is that Super Friends in the 70s really kind of brought Aquaman down. And so they saw in the 80s and 90s a chance to bring him up into this awesome badass character, again with the long hair and the harpoon. So let me pull up my references here, and we'll talk about important Aquaman stories that I think you should check out. Now, Brightest Day, like I mentioned earlier, Brightest Day is still fairly new. I mean, it's 2009, so never mind. That's not that new. That's almost 10 years ago. Wow. So Blackest Night and Brightest Day were pretty, well, I mean, Blackest Night was an amazing storyline. Brightest Day was kind of cool. I didn't love it, but as far as Aquaman concerned, it's a really good Aquaman story. So like I said, in Blackest Night, the main focus of the story, was these Black Lanterns, and Black Lanterns, that the rings, instead of choosing people who were worthy of whatever, it would basically resurrect people, resurrect dead bodies, or actually go into people who were resurrected and they were living at that point. So the way it got Aquaman was actually a pretty messed up story that a lot of people kind of had forgotten about. I feel like a lot of people I knew weren't aware of the story of why Aquaman was actually dead, and it's because Arthur Curry, Aquaman, had given himself up to the gods of the sea in order to bring a city up from the depths of the ocean so that it could be on the surface. And they turned him into the dweller in the depths, and they basically removed his memories. So his actual memories, he thought it was a prophecy of the new Aquaman, this boy who took over the mantle of Aquaman, and the dweller in the depths gave him, told him what he needed to do, told him all this prophecy stuff, but it was actually all about him. He ended up then being murdered and being buried on dry land, which really upset the Atlanteans. That's what set up Blackest Night. That's how he was resurrected and came back. And then in Brightest Day, he was, along with other handful of heroes, he was resurrected, part of the White Lantern Corps, all good, all healthy, but not really, because it actually had some pretty dark moments where he what's the word I'm looking for? He was I think he was fighting some pirates, and he couldn't actually call up any sea animals to help. He could only call dead animals. And they were like zombified squids and krakens. And it was really actually kind of disturbing. And yes, Vance, this beard is getting intense. You should check out our sponsor, Beard Balm Brush. Get it? So it's a really good modern story. It does kind of need a lot of background, though. I feel like it doesn't stand alone that well. If you're looking for something that really stands alone when it comes to Aquaman stories, the current run of Rebirth, really solid, kind of back to basics, him facing off with Ocean Master, him facing off with Black Manta, him taking the throne of Atlantis, giving up the throne of Atlantis. I've really enjoyed the story. Actually, the most recent arc that I think is ending soon, he kind of became like a vigilante in Atlantis because a lot of people thought he was dead. Very relevant to a current political climate, which I think is good for comics. So get out of here if you don't. But the Rebirth and DCU stuff has been really good. Now, New 52, I don't love New 52. I mean, New 52 Batman was really good. And a couple of the stories were not that bad, but I mean, again, the New 52 Aquaman kind of again went back to basics. It's got was well received. So if you're looking again for some standalone Aquaman content, New 52 or Rebirth, either one. I mean, you can always buy the first volume and check it out and see kind of how you're feeling about it. Now, the older comics, it's where it kind of gets. I was gonna say it kind of gets fishy, and I'm not going to, but I might. It would kind of get fishy. So if you want to go back, the reimaginings of Aquaman, like the Sword of Atlantis and the Atlantis Chronicles, and then the beginning of Tomorrow, Aquaman from the 90s. There was a lot of random little one-shot stories that were well received. They retold his story, but I think part of the problem with Aquaman is everyone wants to change that. Everyone wants to change that image that he got in the Super Friends. Him riding the dolphins and waving at all the people. Them at one point making his powers that he had to go back to the water at least. It was either once a day or once an hour. It made him very, very, very weak in a lot of people's opinions. And so people love to mock Aquaman because there's like, oh, what can he do when he's not in water? And speaking of good stories to check out, if you want to check out the Flashpoint stories, which Flashpoint, one of the best DC stories ever. It's when the Flash goes back in time to save his mom, and it ends up causing this massive chain reaction, which redoes a lot of things in the world. One of the things we get Emperor Aquaman, which is when he's sick of the surface and he's like, I'm gonna invade it, and he invades it, and he does battle with Wonder Woman, and everyone's just mean, and it's pretty brutal. So if you check out Emperor Aquaman from Flashpoint, that was a lot of fun. I think it shows kind of what he can do if he was more of a Namor kind of character. Because if you think about it, Namor, the Savage Submariner, and Aquaman, they're the Green Arrow and Hawkeye, Thanos and Darkseid, Superman and Sentry, like the way they kind of go back and forth, and they're very similar power sets. Aquaman, when he's angry, he can do some pretty messed up stuff. Now Ruru, yes, Aquaman. Hey, haven't seen you, by the way. Aquaman does no magic, but he's still lame. Yeah, that's the thing. So many people are trying to change the way they view Aquaman by making him, brooding and dark with the armor and the hook in the 90s, and it wasn't necessarily. It didn't stick. And people are like, oh, go back to the clean cut Aquaman. Now here's what I think should happen, and this is what I've always wanted to happen. I want Aquaman to be given over to like Vertigo. I want Aquaman to be given to like Garth Ennis, Alan Moore, Grant Morrison, the Mark Millar towards the end of his run with DC. I want these people who are known for taking characters and just expanding what their power sets can do and looking at them from a deep, more psychotic way. Because even with the Vance V. Gerard just mentioned, Aquaman was dope in the animated Justice League. He was, but it's still like people they found ways of making fun of him. And I feel like if you gave him over to one of those prolific dark writers, they could take in they could say, oh, the way Alan Moore took Swamp Thing and Mark Millar took Swamp Thing, and they're like, oh yeah, Swamp Thing could do all these things with like greenery. Why couldn't he control the entire planet? If Aquaman controls the 7 seas, which is the majority of the planet, why wouldn't he be able to do all these awful and amazing things? If he has the hydrokinesis, which again, depending on who's writing him, he doesn't have the hydrokinesis, he would be able to flood the entire world. If he has control of all these animals in the sea, like there's just millions and billions of creatures in the sea. He'd be able to rule the planet. But people have here and there written him a little bit like that, but no one's ever given him his due, to really go all out and just own the world. And yes, IJNU Robot, you're right. He is not a waterbender, but when he in the stories, the timelines where he has hydrokinesis, he would be an ocean bender at that point. And yes, Sharpshooter, he could definitely drive up sushi prices. There's so many terrible things and amazing things he could do with his powers. Aquaman 1 through 4, which again was in the 90s, is when they kind of redid, gave him a blue costume. It was how can I put this? It was lame. the again, the kind of the problem with Aquaman is you have to kind of suspend your preconceived notions. Because a lot of people immediately when they hear Aquaman, they think lame. They think riding the dolphins. They think shanana, shanana, shanana. Like if you look at his power sets again, like no one thinks Namor. I mean, some people might think Namor's lame, but Namor is just so brutal in his use of his abilities to control the ocean, his control of an entire species, people and species, Atlanteans. Namor shows what you can do with those powers. But as you can see in the chat room right now, no one takes him seriously. They would just see him, driving up the price of salmon and tuna. This is the problem with Aquaman, and I know they're trying to kind of redo that with giving him over to Jason Momoa and making him, long hair and tatted up, and he drinks and do all these things. I don't know how well it's gonna go over me. I've already I think it's been fun what they've done with him in the movies, but I've also kind of already been annoyed by it just because it's just Jason Momoa being Jason Momoa, which is cool. That's fine, but it's like, okay, like give me something besides him just having a good time and drinking and flipping around and being like, yeah, woo. Like, we'll have to see what happens. So, oh God, you guys have gotten weird with Ruru. Where are you going with this? So yes, I mean that's pretty much that's Aquaman in a nutshell. He's actually disappeared a lot from like the storytelling of DC. There's been huge stretches of time where he was either retired or he was dead at one point, or they just he kind of took a back seat. So there's still a lot of history to the character. Like I said, 70 years of fish justice is nothing to sneeze at. If you're looking for what comics to read on Aquaman, you can always go to your local comic book store, like we go to Empire's Comics Vault, 1120 Fulton Avenue, Suite K. You can check out, Ben's always in there. You can ask him, Ben, what Aquaman comic should I read? And he'll give you a wonderful dose, a wonderful smattering. Never be afraid to go in your local comic book store. I know a lot of people don't have the best experience in there because some employees are not great. Some customers are not great. But yeah, there's always great options to check out in your local comic book store. So that's about it when it comes to Aquaman. We'll see if the movie does well. Like I said, getting good reviews, but I'm not sure. I'm gonna reserve judgment until I see it. But we will not be talking about it. Our sister podcast, The Dame Patrol, on the TCC network, they will be chatting about it briefly on one of their episodes. So that about wraps it up for this week's episode. A little shorter than usual, but that's because it's just me all by my lonesome. But that about does it for Aquaman 101. That is roughly some of the things, allegedly, that you need to know when it comes to the aquatic ace, the marine marvel, the dweller in the depths, Arthur Curry, a.k.a. Aquaman. So that's about going to wrap it up for this week's episode. So if you are looking for gifts for the holidays, Beard Balm Brush. Always check out Beard Balm Brush. They have beeswax, beard balm, beard oil. They make it into a brush. Critical dice. You can get some dice or some D&D related objects for your friends who play tabletop. Use the code CAPELESS, either one, get 15% off. Go into Empire's Comics Vault. Buy a toy for a toy drive. Help some kids out. And you can check out anything related to the Capeless Crusaders at thecapelesscrusaders.com. We have all of our older episodes. We have our D&D episodes. We have the Dame Patrol. They are on there. They got their episodes going. We got Crossover coming up this week, which is Manderson's sports comic crossover show with his brother. And we have Sunday Coffee with the Azorian one. So yes, that is about gonna wrap it up for this week's episode. Thanks for hanging out. My name is, of course, David Barry at Dr. Barry on varying social media platforms. I am not joined this evening by Amy, aka I Jane, you robot, the Azorian one, Anthony Esteves, Son of Mander, aka Manderson, Tom at Tall Dark Not Ugly on everything, and the Dame Patrol themselves. Thanks for hanging out. I am going to not hit the outro music because I'm just going to hang out with you guys, but I'm going to end the episode as far as the podcast is concerned right there.